Hello, I'm Mrs H. You can find my patterns at www.mrs-h.com. My Patreon channel is patreon.com/Barganeer, where I take you through various tips and tricks and skill builders with exclusive patterns too. So today's skill builder tutorial is going to be how to make a custom gift bag. I've included the pattern so you know what size to cut, and I've made mine with a 5-inch base. You can make yours narrower or you can make yours shorter or wider, however you like. But in today's video, I'll take you through the construction of how to make this. As you'll see towards the end of the video, I've only added one drawstring onto mine just because my twill tape is rather thick and my fabric is it's a glitter coated cotton, so it's not letting the twill tape through so easily. But if you want to add another drawstring on the other side, the instructions on how to do that are in this video tutorial. So I hope you enjoy the tutorial and look forward to seeing what you make. Let's get started. Right, so let's run through what we need for the bag then. I've got my exterior fabric, which is this big swirly fabric, and then I've got my lining fabric. I'm using this glittered coated cotton from sohot.co.uk. It's slightly thicker, so I haven't interfaced that. I've interfaced my exterior, but I haven't interfaced my lining. And then for my contrast, I'm actually going to use the same as the lining, but I have cut it separate so that you can see a little bit clearer where it's going in the construction. And then I've also got 2 meters of twill tape. My twill tape is quite wide. You don't need it as wide as this, but it's what I had, so that's what I'm going to use. It'll be fine. It'll just fold slightly smaller during construction. So let's get started. You can put your twill tape to one side for the minute. That's fine, we don't need that. And you can pop your lining to one side for the minute. We're going to use our contrast and our exteriors. And all we're going to do is attach the contrast to each exterior at the top. So if you've got directional fabric, I don't know if I have really, it's kind of all over swirly, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe I'll have this as the top. So if you've got directional fabric, just use your top of your exterior. We're going to match that along the top edge, and we are going to sew it, but I'm going to pin it just to make sure that I'm keeping everything nice and straight. You can just pop it under the sewing machine if you like. Okay, so we're going to do the same for both. These panels are quite large, aren't they? Right, I think I'm going to have this blue as the top on this side, so I'll attach my contrast onto here as well. There are instructions in the pattern if you've got directional contrast fabric as well, so just follow those. Okay, now we're going to sew along the top of these using our regular 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I'm just using my regular stitch length. I'm going to back stitch at the start and the end. Right, so now that we've sewn both of those, we're going to press the seam open. I'll take my pins out first. Better trim my thread now before it crops up later. Right, so all we're going to do is just press these seam allowances open. You can press them towards the exterior if you like, or you can press them towards contrast, or you can press them open. I'm going to press mine open. Oh, I'm trying to do this from the other side. Okay. Okay, that looks very nice and neat. It's very satisfying when you press something and it looks very nice and neat, isn't it? Okay, so do the same on this panel as well. It just keeps those that panel nice and flat and opened up. There's no bits of fabric sort of tucked under that way. Okay. Now we're going to attach our linings onto the contrast. So we've got our exterior fabric, contrast fabric, and my lining fabric is the same as the contrast, just bigger. So now we're going to attach our linings on to that other edge. And don't worry if your cutting isn't 100% straight. Just line it up as best you can, or line up the middles. It won't really be noticed too much in the final gift bag. Right, I think because these are so large, I'll sew this one and then pin the other one and sew the other one. So we're doing the same seam allowance, same stitch length. And then I'll press them both together. Okay, so there's my second panel. Just need to add the lining. So we're right sides together. I should have said that at the start, shouldn't I? So we've got our exterior, contrast and lining. And I'm attaching the lining to the contrast, right sides together, matching up the edges as best I can. And then we'll press the seam allowance open, same as we did for the previous seam. You can make these whichever size you like, really. Don't have to follow the size on the tutorial. So we'll press these seam allowances open as well. Just to make sure that we're nice and neat before we go any further. This is a lot easier on an ironing board rather than my cutting table. But I'm trying to keep everything in the same frame so that you can just watch it in one go, rather than have to keep swapping and changing camera angles. That's very satisfyingly neat as well, isn't it? Very nice. Okay, so we'll do the second one. Let me just show you actually on this what it looks like before I press and after. Can you see? It's all kind of a bit wibbly and bumpy and a bit bulky, whereas this one is just completely flat. Let me compare it to the other one. So, move it down a bit. So this one just sits really nice and neat and flat, and this one just looks a bit bulky. That's why I like to press my seam allowances open on things like this. Just give a really nice, neat, professional finish. Of course, if you're making 70 of these in one go, you might want to maybe think about finding a faster way to do this, or skipping the steaming altogether, but that's up to you. Right, okay, so once we've done that, Let me see what we're going to do. We are going to stitch along top edge. I'm following my instructions, but it's been a little while since I've made one. Right, so we are going to fold this in half, right sides together, match up those side seams. I'm just going to put a pin in just to make sure that I'm completely even on mine, because I'm working on quite a small space at the moment. I'm just putting a pin through the seam allowances to make sure that they're nice and straight. And then I'll make sure that's all nice and flat. Then I'm going to press along this top edge to give me a nice crease to follow. You don't want it to be too permanent. Oh, hang on, I folded them the wrong way maybe. I have folded them the wrong way. That's why my crease is going to be the wrong way round. Let's ignore that. Right, let's pretend we're starting again. So fold them wrong sides together. Gosh, it's a good job somebody knows what they're doing here. Right, fold them wrong sides together. There we go. I just add a pin in either side to make sure that that doesn't move while I'm doing this side. And then we'll press to get a crease in the top, and that just helps us when we come to do our channels for the drawstring at the top. That'll just help us get them nice and accurate. That's better. What was I thinking before? Who knows? So I'm just putting a little crease in there. It doesn't have to be completely 100% sharp. Just a little crease is fine. Okay. So I've got my nice crease there. That'll be the top, very top of the bag then, once we've sewn that together. Let me do that on the second panel. These are very large, aren't they? Somebody's going to need some very big gifts to fill this, I think. As I said, you can cut it down, you can make it whatever size you like. You can make a range of different sizes and maybe keep them in your stash ready for gift giving. That would be very organised. I did know somebody once who always used the same gift wrap sort of over and over, and when they went Christmas shopping they had to take the gift wrap with them to make sure that what they bought would fit perfectly into that shape that was already sort of sellotaped together. That's taking efficiency to the next level, I think. Right, okay. So now we are gonna do right sides together. So we'll take our panel, open your panel out. I'm gonna hang my lining down here so that you can see most of what's going on. And then we're gonna add this second panel on top, right sides together, matching up all of the seams. So we've got exterior to exterior and contrast to contrast and lining to lining. Okay, so matching your seams, pin or clip, whatever you prefer, that all together. We're going to sew both of these panels together along all four edges. I'm going to pin my seam allowances first so that I know no matter what I'm not squiffy on the edges. And then I'll smooth down the outer panels, make sure they're more or less perfectly lined up. Add a couple of pins there just to hold these panels together. And in the bottom corners probably as well. Doesn't matter if you're cutting out, it's a little bit squiffy, don't panic. Nobody will notice really. One in the middle, and then I'll smooth out my lining panels and make sure that they're nicely matched as best we can. And then add a couple of pins in here as well. Bottom corners, a few places along the way. Now I'm going to leave my turning gap in the side actually, so add a double pin there to remind me to leave a turning gap, and double pin there. You can leave your turning gap in the side or the bottom, whatever you prefer. I'm going to leave mine in the side. My side is longer, and it means I can leave a longer turning gap because I don't need to worry about my box corners when it's right up there on the side. Move over so you can see. There's my turning gap that I've marked. Okay. Right, so we are now going to make a few marks. So bring your panel back so you've got access to the contrast here. And we're going to make a mark at 1 5/8 and 2 5/8 from this top crease. So make a mark on your top crease if you want to, so you know that is the top seam there. Right, so once we've pinned that together, we're going to make our marks here. So where you've got your exterior meeting your contrast and you've got your top crease here, I'm going to make a mark 7/8 of an inch away from the top crease and 1 7/8 away. So that is 4.7 centimetres and 2 centimetres. Okay, now we're going to sew around all 4 sides of the bag. So we could start wherever we like, but we are going to leave this turning gap open. And we're also going to start and end stitching at the marks we've made here on the contrast panel. So we're going to leave the bit between these 2 marks open and the bit between these 2 marks on this side also open. Okay, I'm using a contrast thread, so hopefully I'll be able to show you a little bit easier once it's sewn. So we're using our regular seam allowance, although if you want a really nice tight fitting lining, you could always taper to a 1/2 inch seam allowance once you get onto the lining section. And using my regular stitch length, and I'm going to back stitch at the start and end of each of these gaps that we've got on the contrast. Okay, so once we get to the corner, stop with your needle down, lift your presser foot and pivot to turn around the corner. Right, so now I've got up to my double pins where my turning gap is, and I've back stitched to stop there, and then I'm going to increase my stitch length to the longest stitch length I've got and sew to the next set of double pins. Okay, and I'm stopping at the next set of double pins, and then I'm going to decrease my stitch length back down. Bit of back stitching, and then we'll carry on as usual. Okay, so I'm skipping over that bit between the 2 marks. Back stitch at the end, back stitching at the start again. Right, so I'm back to the start where I first started stitching, so I've back stitched again. Right, so at this point you should have 2 sections on your contrast piece which are unsewn, and then on your lining panel you should have a turning gap which has got long basting stitches on it. Right, so let's take the pins out, and then what we're going to do, we'll press a few things, make it nice and neat. This will make our life a little bit easier as we come towards the final construction, and then it'll be time to go shopping to get something to fill up this gift bag. Something rather large, I think. Okay, take all of these pins out. Right, so where we've left these bits open, we're just going to fold the seam allowances back and give that a little press. Let me turn my cutting mat over so that you can see a little bit clearer on the paler colour. Okay, so we're going to fold these seam allowances back and fold them open, so that when we come to the final construction they sit really nice and neat. And we're also going to steam our turning gap as well. So get your iron, got my little pressing mat here. So first of all I'm going to press the little opening on the contrast. This is where our tape is going to go. Our drawstring tape. So I'm just folding that second one back so they can both be pressed back. That just means that when we come to add our tape, hopefully it shouldn't get too stuck on those seam allowances. And we'll do the same for the other side. Fold that back, give it a little press, and then fold the other side back and give it a little press. Okay, now I'm going to go to my turning gap, and first of all I'm going to steam press those stitches. That will leave us a nice little neat line of holes when we take those out. So I'm also going to open up the seam allowance on there. That will help us to get a really nice neat finish when we want to tuck the seam allowances under later and close that turning gap. And then on this other side, just fold them back as well. Just between those 2 bits of double stitching, back stitching, you know, same kind of thing, I guess. I meant my double pins. Right, okay. Lovely. So now we are going to make our boxed bottom. So it's up to you how deep you make your bag. You can go anything from, I don't know, I guess 2 inches, it's 5 centimetres, up to about 6 inches. Might be a bit of a waste of fabric to go up to 6 inches on this. You would maybe need to cut it a little bit better to leave the corners open, save on fabric if you wanted to, but I'll show you how it looks. So what you're going to do is you're going to bring the side seam to match the bottom seam, and it will form this sort of pointed corner. And if you can have a little feel through the fabric and just make sure that those seams are perfectly lined up. I'm going to add a pin through mine, and then I'll be able to show you the different depths of the corners and help you decide a little bit, hopefully. Right, so just make sure that it's nice and flat. Okay, so if you want your bag to be about 2 inches deep, you would draw a line about there-ish. Okay, so that's not very deep. If you wanted it 3 inches, you could draw it about there, which is also not very deep. If you wanted it 4 inches, You could, it would be about there. That would also be okay. I might go for 5 inches. So what you do, you divide your depth. So say I want it 5 inches, you would divide that by 2, so 2.5, and then you would put the 2.5 mark of your ruler on the middle seam, and then just slide your ruler up and down until the end and the number 5 are both on the edges of some fabric. My pin is perfectly in the way there. So I'm on the 2.5 line, so I'm just moving up and down. So that is 5 inches between edge of fabric to edge of fabric. And I'm gonna, I think I will stick with 5. That's quite a nice depth I've got there. Okay, change my pin around. Right, let's do the other 3 corners as well. If you find that your fabric sorry, is a little bit thick, then what you cannot do is snip into that corner there, not quite as far as the stitching, but almost, and it just helps your seam ounces sit a bit neater. Okay. Sorry, I think some fluff just got caught in my throat then. Okay, so by snipping that corner you can see it sits a little bit flatter actually at the end. So if you've got particularly bulky fabric, you might want to do that. And then we'll do, so we'll line up 2.5 with that centre seam. Go as far as we need to. Make sure that your ruler is straight. Add our line. Might move my pin down a bit. There we go. Right, lining points next. Do you know, it made it sit so nice and flat. I'm going to do that again for the lining this time. Okay, so just pinch out the 2 sides of my lining, if I can get hold of it. And that helps me flatten this corner out and bring my side seam to match my bottom seam. Well, this fabric is not liking being moved, I think. I think the glitter is catching like hook and loop tape. Okay, right, so I'll add a pin. Same as I did before. If I talk you through it, then if you're watching in real time, you can follow along. We can be sewing at the same time, rather than you have to pause me. Okay, so 2.5 or whatever measurement you're using. And draw a line with the right side of the pencil this time. Okay. And then this last lining seam, and then we'll sew across these. At this point, we still don't really know what our bags are going to look like. Sorry, excuse me. So I'll add a pin through those seam allowances. Draw a line, and then we can get on with sewing it. Okay. Right, so all we're going to do is we're going to start from one side of the line, go to the other, back stitch at the start and the end. I'm using my regular stitch length and I'm sewing directly on the line. Okay, and we'll do the 2 exterior ones. Just make sure it's nice and flattened out before you start sewing. And then this last one. Okay, all right, so take these pins out then, and then we're going to trim the extra fabric away from these points. You can leave it in if you want, just adds a little bit of extra bulk in your seam allowance, but that's okay. So leave a bit of extra fabric either side of the stitching and then just trim that point off. So I've left a good bit of fabric there. Okay, so in theory these corners shouldn't see too much strain because you've got 2 layers of fabric in each corner. On this side. There we go. Right. Those, I don't know, those little corners could make little elf hats maybe. Right, so now we need to find our turning gap and unpick those stitches. So I need an unpicker. Have I got one here? This is the point where you think I really should put things back in my sewing case where they came from rather than leaving them scattered around like I usually do. Right, I can see one, it's right in the bottom. Hang on, I can see it. Right, there we go. Phew, I've got it. Okay. Right, so now we're going to take out these basting stitches which are across the turning gap. And you should see, as you're unpicking that, a nice line of holes is forming. Nice dotted line. And we'll use that to close our turning gap later. Right. I'm just going along the whole length, taking these out. I've left quite a generous turning gap, but that's never a bad thing. Okay. Better too big than too small. Right, now we can turn our bag right sides out through this gap. This is when we get to see what our bag looks like first time. So just push out those bottom corners and the exterior. Yep, that's good. You could add some stabiliser to this if you want a more sturdy bag, or if you want a gift bag that stands up. Add some stabiliser. I've just added a bit of interfacing just to give it some strength. Right, let me double check I haven't missed any steps now before we go any further. No, okay. Great. Right, so now we're going to close our turning gap. So make sure that that's all right sides out, and then we'll fold along that original crease and add a pin. just to hold these layers together really. So I'm going to use a close machine stitch for this, although you can use a hand ladder stitch if you prefer. It's going to be inside the side of your bag, so it shouldn't be too noticeable. But if you like things to be nice and neat, then you can use a hand stitch instead. So I'm just going really close to the edge on this one without going off. Just to make sure that nothing gets stuck between the layers. Okay, right, so take the pins out. And then we're going to pop this lining inside the exterior. So push that inside. This is a great size bag. I would quite like to receive a present in a bag this size, I think. Could be a good size for lots and lots of lovely things. Okay, so I'm folding along that top crease. Do you remember we made a top crease earlier? Folding along that top crease just to make sure that I've got the lining in the right place. Okay, so that seems like it might be in the right place. Let's just give it a smooth down inside. I'm wearing quite a fluffy cardigan and it's getting stuck on my lining. Okay, that seems pretty good to me. Have a feel. Yeah, so my lining corners are meeting my exterior corners, so I know it's far enough in. Check this side. Yeah, great. Okay, so now we need to give it a little press along the top there, just to neaten up that top edge, just to make sure that that's sort of definitely going to stay nice and neat there. I'm going to do mine both layers together really. Well, on the flat bits anyway. I might separate them on the corners. If you've got your ironing board at this point, you could easily just pop that over the pointy end of your ironing board to give you a nice neat finish. I think this is looking great so far. Excellent, looks very professional. Okay, so now we're going to sew our channel for the drawstring to go into. So we've left a gap, as you can see, got my little gaps on each side. Just going to measure to double check that I've sewn them in a fairly logical or straight way. And then we're going to draw a line around the top. I'm going to use my chalk. If you don't want to draw a line, you can always add a seam guide or a bit of tape onto your machine to indicate where to sew. So let me double check my measurements. So 7/8 of an inch and 1 7/8 on that side. I did well to stick to that seam allowance there then. And the same on this side. Okay, great. So, shall I draw a line? Yeah, I should draw a line. I should draw a line because otherwise I risk it not being neat and I'll be disappointed then, won't I? So I'll draw a line. So this is my 7/8 of an inch line. And I'll do 1 7/8 of an inch as well, and that's going to give us the two lines that we're going to sew along. We should have an inch in between, 2.5 centimeters if you are in metric. So to confirm, 1 7/8 of an inch is, hang on, I've got it here. 1 7/8 of an inch is 4.7 centimeters. And 7/8 of an inch is 2 centimeters. So if you're in metric, those are the measurements you'll probably be working to. Okay, so where you are going from one side to the next, just make sure it sort of matches up neatly. It doesn't matter if it's not exact. And actually any wobbles in the stitching will be very well hidden by the drawstring that we're going to add. So don't panic too much actually about this final top stitching being straight. This is a great project if you are just trying to get back into sewing, or if you haven't got much time and you don't want to have to worry about things being exact. Right, okay, so now all we're going to do is we're going to sew around the entire top along both of those lines, and I'm going to back stitch a little bit at the top and bottom of each gap. So on the sides here where we've got our gap, I'm going to back stitch a little bit there, just a few stitches, and also there, and then I'm going to do the same on this side as well, so that the top and bottom of each gap we've got a bit of back stitching just to secure that with the drawstring coming through. Now I haven't got a extension arm on my machine, I've only got a flatbed, so I'm going to turn my bag inside out so that I'm top stitching on the exterior, and then I'm going to sew with my foot inside the bag, my presser foot, not my actual foot. I have to clarify that, because if my daughter was watching this she would say your foot, actual foot. So starting my needle down, back stitch in there to start, and I'm going to sew it all the way around on the bottom line. Okay, so as I'm approaching the next side seam, I'm just going to do a little bit of back stitching here, and then carry on round to where I started. Okay, so once you've sewn that one line, now we're going to transfer over and sew the second one. So I'm starting again with a back stitch, or a few stitches back stitched over that top, and then I'm going to sew around the second line. Right, so I've got back stitching, or a bit of reinforcement stitching at the top and bottom of each hole on the side seams. So we turn this back right side out. If you've got a free arm, you probably didn't turn it inside out to start with, so you're okay. Right, now we need our twill tape or ribbon, or whatever it is that you're using, and a bodkin or a large safety pin. I'm using this bodkin, which is, I think it's by Clover. I think I got it, yes, Clover. And you just clamp the end in to the bodkin, like so. And then feed it through, which is quite nice and easy. Right, I've got a few loose threads. Let's get rid of those. So we're going to start at one side and go, oh dear, I didn't leave my seam. I didn't check that my seam allowances were still open on the back on that side. encourage it with my bodkin. Okay, so we're going to go from one side and we're going to go all the way round back to where we started. Just encourage it in. My twill tape is a little bit larger than is ideal, but I'm hoping I can give it some gentle persuasion so that it goes all the way in. Oh, don't come out that second side. Keep going round. Going back round to where we started. Keep going. It's a bit easier with ribbon or tape that isn't quite so large. Okay, I'm nearly at the end there. Oh no, I've come unbobbined. Oh dear. Unbobbined? Bodkined. My bodkin is stuck inside. Not going too well, is it? Well, that didn't go too well. Right, let me try again. I wonder actually if I press my tape in half, whether it might go through a bit easier. Let's try that. Could always stitch it in half as well, couldn't I? Okay, right, let's try that with it folded and pressed in half. See if that helps. Okay, right, it seems slowly is the key. And we're coming back out of the same side that we went in. And encourage this other rest of the ribbon to go through. Okay. I can promise you this is a lot easier if you use a nice satiny ribbon and you don't use glitter coated cotton. Right, so we're back out. So before I go any further, I'm going to tie these two ends together so that I don't lose any while we're evening this out. Oh, I can't, hang on, I've got to get a bit more out. There we go, that's a bit better. Once you can get a real good hold on it, you can pull it through a bit easier. Now, if that was painful enough for you, you can leave it at just one drawstring. Or you can add second drawstring. Right, so if you find you've got one side has got a bit more tape than the other, just give it a bit of a yank to even it out. There we go. Okay, so there's one in. I'll show you how it looks with just one in. That's how it looks just with one ribbon or tape, which actually is completely fine if you wanted to do that. And if you wanted to add the second one in, do you know, I'm really not convinced that that would be a good idea for me with how hard it was to get that ribbon through. If you did want to add a second one in though, I'll show you how, I'll explain how to do it in case you do want to add a second one in. All you would do is, this is the side that we put the original one in, you would just thread through from the second opening and go all the way round. So you would have exactly the same as this on both sides, and then you could pull it closed like that. But I think in light of how tough it was for me to get that one through, I might just leave it with one. If you do have any problems putting the second one in or want some advice or it's not clear, then please give me a shout, okay? Drop me an email or send me a message or something and ask. But actually I think that looks quite nice, and I don't know, who wouldn't want to receive a gift in a beautiful handmade gift bag? It looks quite fun with that little ruffled top, doesn't it? So that's our custom made handmade gift bag. As I said, you can add some stabilizer into it if you want it to stand up. Mine is a bit more lightweight, which is good for posting if you're posting anything, but that should last you a good number of years. It's nice and strong. I think that will be something that you could use over and over. So I really appreciate you watching. Thank you very much for your support. I hope you do make some gift bags. If you do, please let me know. I'd like to see them. You can contact me at mrsh@mrs-h.com, or you can find me on Facebook at Sewing Patterns by Mrs H. And my Patreon channel is patreon.com/Baganeer. I hope you have a great season. And if you make any gift bags, please let me know.